What is up, y'all? Welcome back to my podcast, the Atlanta Audible. As usual, I'm your host, Ice Ray, and today it's actually icy outside, so I hope you guys are staying safe. But this episode is going to be a little different. I'm going to be doing a Super Bowl preview. I'll be explaining exactly how the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots became Super Bowl contenders, and then give my pick for who I think will be hoisting the Lombardi Trophy on the night of February 8th. So, the Seahawks and the Patriots will be facing off in Super Bowl 60, a rematch of Super Bowl 49, which occurred 11 years ago. And while both teams built their Super Bowl contending teams in different ways, some fundamental concepts remain the same, and I'll be breaking them down in this video. So, how did these teams build their Super Bowl contending teams? Well, first, they nailed the head coaching position. Both the Seahawks and the Patriots had Hall of Fame coaches in Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll. Belichick is arguably the greatest head coach of all time, winning 6 Super Bowl rings during his time in New England. Meanwhile, Carroll is great in his own right. He helped turn around the Seattle Seahawks franchise and led them to their first ever Super Bowl win in 2013. He also coached arguably the greatest defense of all time in the Legion of Boom. However, despite all of this success, both teams knew when it was time to move on from their Hall of Fame head coaches. The Pats won 12 games combined in Belichick's final 2 seasons. However, in 2 of the 3 seasons prior to his termination, they had made the playoffs, including winning 10 games with Mac Jones under center, who since leaving New England has been a journeyman backup quarterback on 2 different teams. Still, the organization was not complacent, and they cut ties with one of the greatest head coaches in NFL history. You need to know when it's time to move on. And I'm so glad that Arthur Blank knew it was time to move on from Raheem Morris, who was wasting playoff caliber rosters during his time in Atlanta. New England went on to hire Mike Vrabel ahead of the 2025 season, and they went 14-3 and are now in Super Bowl 60. Vrabel had a ton of success in Tennessee, and honestly, it's insane that he was fired to begin with. He was 54-45 during his tenure with the Titans, a 54.5% winning percentage, and averaged 9 wins a season. In the 6 years prior to Vrabel's arrival, the Titans had won 36 total games, averaging 6 wins per season. He led the Titans to the playoffs 3 times, including an AFC Championship berth in 2019. He also led the franchise to their first ever first seed, winning 12 games in 2021. So, in 6 seasons with the Titans, Vrabel led them to the playoffs 3 times, led them to a playoff win over the 14-win Ravens in 2019, and led them to an AFC Championship berth. In the 15 seasons prior to Vrabel's arrival in Tennessee, they had 3 playoff berths combined. Vrabel was helping to turn around a poor franchise, and they rewarded him by firing him. Now, a well-run franchise picked him up, and they're using it to their own gain, with the Patriots finding themselves in Super Bowl 60. Now I see the Browns doing something similar with Kevin Stefanski, who was turning around that franchise. Stefanski won 7 or more games in 4 of his 6 seasons with the Cleveland Browns. In the 16 seasons prior to Stefanski's arrival, they won 7 or more games just 3 times. He also led the Browns to not just 1, but 2 playoff berths. In the 18 seasons prior to Stefanski's arrival, they had made the playoffs just once. Stefanski won 11 or more games in 2 of his 6 seasons with the Browns. Mike Vrabel won 11 or more games in 2 of his 6 seasons with the Titans. Stefanski helped lead the Browns to their first playoff victory since 1994. Vrabel helped lead the Titans to their first AFC Championship since 2002. There's a lot of similarity. Teams should not get complacent, and I still believe that. However, everything needs to be taken with context. You need to contextualize the situation. And for the Browns and Titans to fire their coaches who are turning around those franchises, that's just crazy. But the Patriots benefited from it, and I think that the Falcons can too. However, Falcons fans keep saying, why should we want a coach who was fired by the Browns? Well, the Patriots just hired a coach that was fired by the Titans. And since Vrabel's departure in Tennessee, the Titans have won just 6 games combined in the last 2 seasons. Being content with mediocre results is exactly what the Seahawks refused to do as they fired Pete Carroll. Pete finished his final 2 seasons with the Seahawks 9-8, an 18-16 record overall, including a playoff berth in 2022, his second to last season with Seattle. Seattle fired the head coach that won the franchise its first ever Super Bowl ring and made the playoffs in 11 of his 14 seasons. And the craziest part is they somehow managed to upgrade. Mike Macdonald has a 24-10 70.5% winning percentage record as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He's won 10 or more games in both of his seasons with the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks just barely missed the playoffs in a stacked NFC in 2024. And in 2025, they won 14 games and find themselves in the Super Bowl. So both Super Bowl teams knew when it was time to move on from their Hall of Fame coaches, refusing to be complacent and refusing to be stuck in mediocrity. But there's a chance that the Atlanta Falcons might have kept Raheem Morris, who finished 8-9 in each of his first 2 seasons with the Falcons, including blowing a 6-3 start to the 2024 NFL season. Good teams know when it's time to move on. Good teams always make the right decisions. The next piece of the puzzle that every Super Bowl team needs to hit on is the quarterback. Now there's 2 ways of going about and getting your guy. Either you draft one or you get your guy in free agency. Now the Falcons tried to do both of this, drafting Michael Penix Jr. and signing Kirk Cousins. And as of right now, neither has worked out for them. The Patriots drafted Mac Jones 15th overall in 2021. He helped the team win 10 games and led the Patriots to the playoffs during his rookie season. However, in the 2 seasons to follow, he would never throw for more than 14 touchdowns during his time with New England. The Patriots knew it was time to cut ties after just 3 years with the team, and they drafted Drake May 3rd overall in the 2024 NFL Draft. The Falcons drafted Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall in that same draft. In the last 2 seasons combined, Penix has had just 12 career starts, not even a season worth of starts, before he partially tore his ACL in Week 11 of 2025. Penix has flashed some good during his starts, and also some bad.
16, Penix, pump, Penix, throw, rainbow, caught by London.
Flo has to get home.
They're bringing it. Penix backpedals, lofts it downfield. London can't get to it. There's a...
Michael Penix Jr. will likely be the Falcons' starting quarterback in 2026 when he returns from injury, which may be as early as Week 1. However, if Penix does not look like an absolute superstar in 2026, the Falcons will need to learn from the Patriots and move on. The 2027 QB draft is absolutely loaded, and Atlanta could maybe find their next franchise star in that draft. I like Penix and want him to succeed, but this is a business, and the Falcons need to learn from the Patriots and do what's best for the organization, like the Patriots did when they moved on from Mac Jones, and now Drake May has them in the Super Bowl in just year 2. The Seahawks went the other route. They found their quarterback in free agency. Seattle signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year contract worth over $100 million ahead of the 2025 NFL season. Before that, they had signed Geno Smith to a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. They then extended him after he led the league in completion percentage in 2022. Seattle has thrived off their free agent quarterbacks since the departure of Russell Wilson. Geno Smith led the team to 1 playoff appearance in 2 seasons, and Sam Darnold has them in the Super Bowl in his first season with the team. The Falcons tried to do something similar when they signed Kirk Cousins ahead of the 2024 NFL season. Atlanta handed Cousins a 4-year deal worth $180 million. The issue was that Cousins was 35 coming off of a season-ending injury. Not to mention, it was a longer 4-year deal. The way the Seahawks set up Darnold's contract is that if he sucked this year, they had an out after the first year. But now that the team has made the Super Bowl, they'll most definitely keep Darnold on the roster. Just amazingly smart team building. And they did a similar thing with Geno, giving him a 1-year contract and then extending him after he balled out. So, both teams knew not to be complacent with their head coaches and then nailed the protege. Both teams knew not to be complacent with their quarterbacks and then nailed the protege, despite taking different routes to get there. And both of these teams knew where to start when building their Super Bowl contending rosters, starting on the defensive side of the ball. Everyone's heard the phrase, defense wins championships. Well, both of these teams have stellar defenses. Both were top 10 in terms of total defense. The Seahawks 6th, surrendering just 285.6 yards per game, and the Patriots 8th, surrendering 295.2. Both were top 10 in passing yards surrendered per game, at 9th and 10th respectively. Both were top 6 in rushing yards surrendered per game, at 3rd and 6th respectively. And both were top 4 in total scoring defense, at 1st and 4th respectively. The Seahawks allowed 17.2 points per game, and the Patriots allowed 18.8 points per game. New England invested a lot on the defensive side of the ball in free agency. Their biggest get was linebacker Harold Landry. After finishing the 2024 season last in the NFL in sacks, the Patriots invested in their pass rush, and Landry finished the season with 8.5 sacks. In fact, both of their sack leaders in 2025 were free agents, with the Patriots signing K'Lavon Chaisson in free agency. He finished the season with 7.5 sacks. Funnily enough, the player on the Patriots who finished 4th in sacks, Milton Williams, was also a free agent signing. He's a defensive tackle who finished the season with 3.5 sacks. He's the player who got the game-winning sack of Justin Herbert in the Patriots' wild-card victory over the Los Angeles Chargers a few weeks ago. Another huge signing for New England was linebacker Robert Spillane, who finished the season with 97 total tackles, 2 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble. And then, a splash move was signing Carlton Davis to be their cornerback 2 alongside All-Pro Christian Gonzalez. While Davis had no interceptions in 2025, he surrendered just 448 yards on the season. So it's just the 38th most among corners who played at least 50% of their team's defensive snaps in 2025. Now this is a crazy stat. Of New England's 11 current starters listed on the depth chart, only 4 of them were drafted. The other 7 were added through free agency. So the Patriots drafted their franchise quarterback in Drake May, and then they built him a defense through free agency. Now the Seahawks had a more even split when building their defense, getting roughly half their guys through free agency and half their guys through the draft. Their drafted guys include Nick Emenwari, who was one of the best safeties in the NFL this season as a rookie. Devin Witherspoon, who was currently one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL and was a second-team All-Pro this season. Kobe Bryant, who was tied 8th in the NFL in interceptions with 4 this season. Byron Murphy, and Tariq Woolen. So the Seahawks had a more even split. They built their defense both through the draft and in free agency. For the first time under Terry Fontenot, Atlanta invested heavily on the defensive side of the ball in the 2025 NFL Draft. They can continue to build their defense through free agency. However, of their premier guys on the defensive side of the ball, the only guy to come through free agency was Jesse Bates. On the offensive side of the ball, both Super Bowl teams have one premier weapon, Jackson Smith-Njigba for the Seattle Seahawks and Stephon Diggs for the New England Patriots. The Seahawks invested heavily into their offensive line, and the team surrendered just 27 sacks in 2025, tied for the 5th least in the NFL. The Patriots attempted to invest in their offensive line, taking left tackle Will Campbell top 5 in the 2025 NFL Draft. However, as of the last few games, he has not been very good. The Patriots finished 23rd in the league in sacks surrendered, giving up 48. However, to counteract this, the Patriots ran the ball, and they ran the ball a lot. They finished 1st in the league in yards per attempt. Both teams were running back by committee offenses, with Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson splitting carries in New England. They finished 6th in the NFL in rushing yards per game, averaging 128.9 yards per game. In Seattle, it was Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker toting the rock, with both running backs combining for over 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns on the ground. However, with Kenneth Walker exploding for 3 touchdowns against the 49ers in the divisional round of the playoffs after Zach Charbonnet went down with injury, and Ramondre Stevenson being tied 6th among running backs for the most fumbles, it proves that you don't necessarily need 2 running backs to be successful. But it is a nice luxury to have. Unfortunately, the Atlanta Falcons wasted their window of winning with both Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier on the roster. Algier is set to be a free agent this offseason, and it's unlikely that he'll return to Atlanta. However, the 2024 Eagles proved that you can win a Super Bowl with an all-time running back leading your offense. And that's exactly what the Falcons have in Bijan Robinson.
Player. Here's Robinson, right side. Nice cutback. He's gone. Can anybody catch him?
Not tonight.
McCreary chasing. Won't get there. Touchdown, Atlanta.
The Seahawks and Patriots both proved that you don't need an offense chock full of weapons to compete. Outside of their main guys in JSN and Diggs, neither team really has household names. The Patriots have Mac Hollins, who was a Falcon back in 2023, Kayshon Boutte, and Demario Douglas. The Seahawks have Rashid Shaheed, an elite special teamer, an older Cooper Kupp, and Jake Bobo. So you need to invest in at least one premier pass catcher for your quarterback. But you don't need a plethora of weapons. It's better to instead invest in different parts of your team, especially the defensive side of the ball. So, the Falcons drafting a tight end top 4 in the first year of a rebuild was just not very smart, especially when Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley were still on the roster at the time. Besides the Patriots and the Chiefs, no team that's won the Super Bowl recently has had an elite tight end. The Eagles won with Dallas Goedert, who's injured most of the time, and the Rams won with Kobe Parkinson. I mean, look at both teams competing in the Super Bowl this year. They both have committees at tight end. The Patriots have Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, who combined for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. The Seahawks have Elijah Arroyo and AJ Barner, who combined for over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, an elite tight end is not an integral part of a Super Bowl contending roster in 2026. But Atlanta has the rudimentary building blocks to be like either of the 2026 Super Bowl contending teams. They just need to flesh out their team, and hopefully Kevin Stefanski is the truth. Now, I'll move on to my Super Bowl predictions. I think that the Seattle Seahawks will take this game. I mean, that defense is ridiculous. In their last 8 games, including the playoffs, they've held their opponents to 27, 6, 3, 10, 37, 16, 9, and 0. The 2 games where teams actually scored against them were against the Rams. So of their last 6 games not against the Rams, no team has scored more than 16 points against them. And they held the 49ers to 9 points combined in their last 2 matchups. I mean, that is just ridiculous. Seattle's defense dominated the 49ers in the divisional round of the playoffs. The defense forced 3 total turnovers, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble. They also stopped the 49ers from converting on 4th down on 3 separate occasions. Just uber impressive from the Seattle defense. And I know you can say the same about the Patriots defense. In their last 8 games, including the playoffs, they've held their opponents to 7, 3, 16, 10, 10, 24, 35, and 15. The Patriots have held their opponents to just 26 combined points in 3 playoff games, which is super impressive. However, the caliber of offenses they've faced is different from that of Seattle's. The Seahawks shut down the 49ers twice, a team who was top 10 in scoring offense, averaging over 25.7 points per game. The Patriots faced the Chargers, who were 20th in scoring offense, and the Texans and Broncos, who were 14th and 13th. And they faced the Broncos during a snowstorm without their starting quarterback in Bo Nix. Not to mention, the Seattle Seahawks offense has been humming. The Patriots have scored just 47 total offensive points in their 3 playoff games combined. Not to mention, the Seattle Seahawks offense has been humming. The Patriots have scored 47 total offensive points in their 3 playoff games combined. The Seahawks scored 41 points in their first playoff game alone, and that was against a 49ers defense that was in the upper half of the league in terms of points surrendered. The Patriots have scored the least amount of playoff points ever by a team to make it to the Super Bowl. Not to mention that 7 of their 47 offensive points scored were gifted to them by a terrible Jarrett Stidham fumble that set the team up for 1st and goal and set them up for their only touchdown in the AFC Championship game this year. If we go position for position, the Patriots have the better quarterback. Drake May was an MVP candidate in 2025. He threw 31 touchdowns, the 3rd most in the NFL. However, he has not been as good in the playoffs as he was in the regular season. So if one wants to say that Sam Darnold has currently been better, they have an argument for that. However, I'm going to go with Drake May overall, just for the stellar season he's had this year. Running back, I'm going to have to go Seattle. I love Trevion Henderson, but Kenneth Walker has been unreal this season, especially in the playoffs. I mean, he just hung a hat trick on the head of the 49ers in the divisional round, en route to a 41-6 victory. And he looked unstoppable against the Rams in the first half. He totaled 119 yards from scrimmage, including a touchdown, against one of the better defenses in the league, mind you. Wide receiver also has to go to Seattle. Jackson Smith-Njigba was the best wide receiver in the NFL this season. You could argue that it was Puka Nacua, but JSN led the league in receiving yards. Not to mention, if we go core for core, I still think the Seattle Seahawks got it. JSN is better than Diggs. Rashid Shaheed is currently Seattle's wide receiver 2, and he's better than Kayshon Boutte. However, since coming to Seattle, Shaheed has 6 games with 1 or fewer catches. So it makes sense that if someone wants to put Boutte over Shaheed, especially when Boutte is making catches like this in the playoffs. However, if you're going overall, you gotta give it to Shaheed, which the numbers don't recognize his impact he's had on the run game and in special teams. Wide receiver 3 is between Cooper Kupp and Mac Hollins. And honestly, it's crazy that the stats are even remotely similar, because Cooper Kupp has a triple crown on his resume in this decade. I'm not going to sit here and debate 2026 Mac Hollins versus Cooper Kupp. That one's just up for preference. But I will say that Cooper Kupp is the one I trust more to make a big play in a big moment than Mac Hollins. However, I will say that the Patriots have better depth behind their top 3 weapons than Seattle does. New England also has Demario Douglas, who had 447 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Kyle Williams, who had 209 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. Meanwhile, Seattle's depth behind Kupp, Shaheed, and JSN, with Torrey Horton hurt, is Jake Bobo, who had just 20 yards all season. However, he did have a touchdown against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. So, I would say that the Seahawks have the stronger wide receiver core at the top, mostly because of JSN and how he's arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. But the Patriots have the deeper core. Tight end is once again close, but I would lean towards the New England Patriots. Hunter Henry had 200 more yards and 1 more touchdown than AJ Barner did this season. Not to mention, he's been better in the playoffs. In his 3 playoff games this year, Hunter Henry has 6 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. In AJ Barner's 2 playoff games this year, he only has 2 catches for 13 yards. So I think tight end can go to New England in Hunter Henry. Offensive line obviously goes to Seattle, and this one's not very close. The Seahawks line only surrendered 27 sacks, and the Patriots line surrendered 48 sacks, almost double Seattle's. The Seahawks have a better defense than the Patriots. The Seahawks are 1st in points per game, 6th in total defense per game, 10th in passing yards per game, and 3rd in rushing yards per game. The Patriots are 4th, 8th, 9th, and 6th in those stats respectively. Not to mention, Seattle is just flat out better on all 3 levels than New England is. The Seahawks were tied 7th in the league in sacks with 47. The Patriots were 26th with 35. The Seahawks had 4 defenders with 6 or more sacks. The Patriots had just 2. DeMarcus Lawrence had 3 forced fumbles by himself. No member of the Patriots defensive line had more than 2. DeMarcus Lawrence had 19 hurries by himself. The Patriots' top 3 defenders combined had 14 hurries. The Seattle Seahawks are better on the pass rushing front than the New England Patriots. At the linebacker level, Seattle's Ernest Jones is the best defender out of the 4 starting linebackers for either team. He was top 20 in tackles with 126 and also hauled in 5 interceptions. And then his teammate, Drake Thomas, had the most sacks and tackles for losses of the bunch. Thomas had 3.5 sacks, 10 tackles for losses, and 6 quarterback hits. New England's Christian Ellis and Robert Spillane combined had 1 sack, 4 tackles for losses, and 3 QB hits. And the final level is the secondary. One could argue that Christian Gonzalez is the best player on either team's secondary. However, Devin Witherspoon was also named a second-team All-Pro for his play in 2025. However, there's no debating that Seattle has the better secondary overall. The Seahawks were 5th in the league in interceptions with 18. The Patriots were in the bottom half of this metric with 10. Interceptions are, of course, not the only metric. Per PFF's coverage grades, the New England Patriots' top 2 corners were Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis, receiving a 73.4 and 70.9 score. Their top 2 safeties in Jalen Hawkins and Craig Woodson received a 76.6 score and a 67.5. Meanwhile, Seattle's top 2 corners in Devin Witherspoon and Josh Jobe received an 86.6 and 51.2 score. Their top 2 safeties in Julian Love and Nick Emenwari earned an 89.2 and 73.3 score. Love's 89.2 score coverage grade was the highest grade of all safeties in the NFL last season. So he's the best safety in coverage according to PFF last year. Not to mention, Kobe Bryant and Julian Love are 2 of the 3 defenders to not allow a single reception in the postseason this year. That Seattle secondary is clamps. So, Seattle is better at running back, offensive line, wide receiver, and defensively. On paper, they should dominate this game. However, we all know that it doesn't always go like that. In 2023, the Eagles had the far superior roster to the Chiefs, but they lost because Patrick Mahomes is that guy. If Drake May wants to prove that he's one of the best in the league, this will be the place to start, seeing how he can handle that Seattle defense on the biggest of stages. This will show if Drake May is one of them ones or not. However, I think that Seattle wins this one 24-17 in a rematch of Super Bowl 49. And for those keeping track at home, the Seahawks and the Patriots faced off at Super Bowl 49. 2 years later, the Falcons and the Patriots faced off in Super Bowl 51. If history really does repeat itself, with Seattle and New England facing off in the playoffs again, in the Super Bowl again, and if Seattle does manage to win this time, that means in 2 years from now, the Falcons and the Patriots will face off in the Super Bowl. And this time, Atlanta will get its revenge, winning its first ever Super Bowl against a team that humiliated them in Super Bowl 51. These are my predictions. This is how I think both teams built their Super Bowl contenders. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, stay safe, stay warm. Ice Ray out.